Hello, and welcome back on your mathematical journey. So today we're going to take a look at fractions, decimals, and percentages and see how to go sort of switch in between each of them interchangeably. So here I've sort of written up three examples, sort of one of each, and we'll be able to practice going in both directions for all of these. So the first thing I want to do is let's start with the fraction. Let's start with 9 over 25, or 9/25. So the easiest way to turn a fraction into a decimal is to essentially perform the computation that the fraction is telling us to do. Remember that a horizontal line in this case represents divides. So we can actually go ahead and divide 9 by 25. Now remember in this case that the 9 will actually go on the inside of our division. Remember, we are dividing by 25 on the outside. Now, your first thought might be, well, how can we do this? 25 goes into 9 0 times. And that's an astute point. But remember, we can always put a decimal point here because 9 is the same number as 9.0, which is the same as 9.00, which is the same as, so on and so forth. As long as I put a decimal here, I can add as many zeros as I would like after the decimal, and that won't change the value. So now let's see if we can perform the division. So remember, decimal will be going straight up here. So how many times does 25 go into 90? Well, 25 is going to go into 90 3 times. So 3 times 25 will be 75. We'll go ahead and subtract, right? 90 minus 75, we'll borrow from here. 10, right? 10 minus 5 is 5. 8 minus 7 is 1, right? So next, we'll bring down the 0 here, right? Now, next question is how many times does 25 go into 150? Well, that will be 6 times. So 6 times 25 is in fact 150. So that will leave us with our remainder of 0. So we have successfully determined that 9 divided by 25 will give us a decimal, note that there's a decimal here, of 0.36. And then all we need to do to take a decimal and turn it into a percentage is to multiply it by 100. And remember that multiplying something by 100 is the same as just moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. So if we have 0.36, we move it to the right once, we move it to the right twice. So we will get an answer of 36% for 9/25 with a decimal of 0.36. Now we'll go on to the next one, 0.18, right, as we just showed, right? To go from a decimal to a percentage, we'll do that quickly, right? Multiply by 100, right? Move the decimal place 2 places to the right, and that will give us 18% as an answer. And then what we can do to take a percentage and turn it back into a fraction is to think about 18%. Well, what does that actually represent? Well, that represents 18 100ths, right? 18 out of 100. So we can start by saying that 18%, or 0.18, represents the fraction 18 over 100. And technically speaking, we could write 18 100ths here. Now, of course, we can simplify the fraction in this case, which we will do, right? We can divide both the top and the bottom by 2. Right? 18 divided by 2 is 9, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. So, right, the reduced fraction that we get from 0.18, or 18%, is going to be 9 over 50. So, right, we just started by literally turning this into the fraction itself and then working from there. Lastly, we'll look at 60%. Well, if we said that going from a decimal to a percentage was multiplying by 100, astute observers might have noticed that to get from a percentage to a decimal, we will divide this by 100, right? Which is the same as moving a decimal 2 places to the left. So if we have 60, we'll move it 1 place to the left, we'll move it 2 places to the left, right? That will give us a decimal of 0.60, but remember that when we have a decimal, if we have any trailing zeros, which we would have in this case, 0.60, right, we can just go ahead and remove the last trailing zero. So, right, this will end up being 0.6 as a decimal. And then we'll do the same thing as before to take this percentage and turn it into a fraction, right? 60% means 60 out of 100, right? Well, we can reduce this a little bit further, right? At the very least, we can see that we have a 0 on both of the end of each of these terms. So 60 over 100 will be the same thing as 6 over 10 if we just divide the top and the bottom by 10. And then lastly, right, we can divide the top and the bottom, in this case, both by 2, right? 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the reduced fraction that we get will be 3/5. So, quick overview, right? If you needed to brush up or you wanted to get ready for a standardized test, right? This is a refresher on how to switch interchangeably between fractions, decimals, and percentages. Each of them have their own uses, depends on the context. Anyway, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, happy mathing and have a good day.